For years, Officer Daniel Briggs and Officer Mark Keller abused their badges. Every false report was buried, every complaint erased, every show of force excused. They believed no one could touch them, that their power was absolute. Until they confronted the wrong woman, a blind black judge walking with her service dog through a quiet neighborhood. To them, she seemed vulnerable, easy to dismiss, another complaint that would vanish like all the others. They didn't see the federal judge beneath the dark glasses, a woman armed not with weapons but with law, resolve, and allies. When their arrogance pulled the trigger on her loyal dog, they ignited a fight they could never contain, one that would burn them from within. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The morning light spilled over the treetops in Oak Ridge Estates, casting long shadows across the pristine sidewalks. Judge Mariah Ellison stepped carefully along her familiar route, the gentle pressure of Justice's harness in her left hand. The German Shepherd moved with purpose, his steps synchronized with hers after years of partnership. "Good morning, Mrs. Chen," Mariah called, her keen hearing picking up the distinctive sound of her neighbor's garden shears trimming roses. "Judge Ellison, beautiful morning, isn't it?" Mrs. Chen replied, her voice warm. "Justice looking handsome as always." Mariah smiled, running her free hand along Justice's back. His fur felt warm in the early sunlight. He knows it too. Gets extra proud when people compliment him. Justice's tail wagged steadily as they continued their walk. The neighborhood smelled of fresh-cut grass and flowering jasmine. Mariah had memorized every crack in the sidewalk, every driveway, every fire hydrant along their route. Her blindness had never stopped her from mapping her world with precision. 3 steps to the Miller's driveway, she murmured to herself, an old habit from when she'd first lost her sight 15 years ago. Now it was second nature, but the quiet reminders gave her comfort. Justice stopped at the corner, waiting for her command to cross. Mariah listened carefully for cars, then nodded. Forward. They were halfway across Maple Street when she felt Justice tense slightly under her hand. The dog's pace slowed, a signal that someone was approaching. Mariah recognized the heavy footsteps even before the sour smell of cigarettes reached her. Harold Whitaker. The thought made her shoulders tighten. "Morning," she said politely, though she knew better than to expect a response. 3 years of living on the same block had taught her that much. Harold made a sound, something between a grunt and a snort. "Yeah." Justice maintained perfect position beside her, ignoring Harold completely as they passed. Mariah held her head high, her posture impeccable. 15 years on the federal bench had taught her to carry dignity like armor. Behind them, Harold's voice carried in a deliberate half-whisper. "Doesn't belong here. Bringing down property values." The words were meant for her to hear. Mariah kept walking, her face composed even as anger flared inside her chest. Justice sensed her tension and pressed closer to her leg. A small comfort. They'd almost reached the end of the block when a squirrel darted across their path. Justice gave one sharp bark and pulled slightly on his harness, the first break in his perfect behavior all morning. "Easy, Justice," Mariah said calmly, stroking his head. "Leave it." The dog immediately returned to position, the momentary distraction forgotten. Mariah smiled, proud of his quick response. She reached into her pocket for a small treat, rewarding his obedience. Behind them, Harold Whitaker watched with narrowed eyes. His face twisted into something ugly as he pulled out his phone. This was exactly what he'd been waiting for. Any excuse, any small infraction. His thumb jabbed at the screen as he dialed 911. "Emergency services," came the operator's voice. Harold's tone instantly changed, infused with false panic. "Yes, I need to report a dangerous situation. There's a black woman who can't control her aggressive dog. It's lunging at everything. Nearly attacked me. He turned away from the street, lowering his voice. She's blind. Can't see what that animal is doing. There are kids in this neighborhood. They're not safe with that beast around. The operator asked for his location, which he provided quickly, adding, "Hurry, before someone gets hurt." The dog's a German Shepherd, big one. She's heading east on Maple toward the park. After hanging up, Harold watched Mariah's retreating figure with bitter satisfaction. His lips curved into a thin smile. She walked with such confidence as if she belonged in this neighborhood, his neighborhood. The dog was just an excuse. What really bothered him was her presence, her success, her refusal to be intimidated by him. "We'll see how proud you are now," he muttered, pocketing his phone. Across town at the police station, the dispatch radio crackled to life. "Unit 47, we've got a call about an aggressive dog threatening neighborhood children at Oak Ridge Estates, Maple Street near Parkview Lane." Officer Daniel Briggs grabbed the radio. "Unit 47 responding. Details on the dog?" "German Shepherd. Handler reported as a blind black female, heading toward the park area." Briggs looked over at his partner, Officer Mark Keller, who was finishing his coffee. "Got a dog call. Guess we're animal control today." Keller tossed his empty cup in the trash. "Better than writing tickets. What's the situation?" "Some shepherd going crazy. Owner can't control it." Briggs stood up, checking his belt. "Apparently she's blind. Recipe for disaster right there." Keller smirked, adjusting his cap. "Blind person with an aggressive dog. What could go wrong?" His tone dripped with sarcasm. "Let's go before some kid gets their face chewed off." They headed to the patrol car, Briggs sliding behind the wheel. "You know the protocol on dangerous animals," he said, his voice suddenly serious. Keller nodded, his expression hardening. "If that dog makes one wrong move—" "Exactly." Briggs started the engine, flipping on the siren as they pulled out of the station. "Better safe than sorry." As they drove, Keller pulled up the neighborhood on his phone. Oak Ridge Estates. Fancy area. Probably some rich lady who got a guard dog she can't handle. "Don't matter how rich she is," Briggs said, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Law's the law. Dog goes after someone. We do what needs doing." The patrol car sped through morning traffic, siren wailing. Inside, both officers had already formed a picture in their minds of what they'd find, a picture tainted by Harold's exaggerated report, by their own preconceptions, by a system that trained them to see threats first and people second. 5 minutes out," Briggs announced, pressing harder on the accelerator. Keller nodded, looking out the window at the increasingly upscale houses as they entered Oak Ridge Estates. "Let's get this over with." The morning sun glinted off their badges as they raced toward Maple Street, toward Justice and Mariah, toward a confrontation built on lies and prejudice, a confrontation neither the judge nor her loyal companion saw coming. The police cruiser screeched to a halt at the curb, its tires catching on loose gravel. Officer Briggs killed the siren but left the roof lights flashing, casting alternating blue and red shadows across the peaceful street. Both officers exited the vehicle quickly, doors slamming in near-perfect unison. Mariah stood on the sidewalk near the entrance to the small neighborhood park, one hand on Justice's harness. The German Shepherd sat perfectly at her side, alert but calm. They had paused to enjoy the morning breeze carrying the scent of fresh-cut grass and flowering dogwoods. "Something's happening," Mariah said quietly, her head tilting as she registered the sound of slamming car doors and heavy boots approaching rapidly. Justice's ears perked forward, but he remained seated, trained not to react without cause. Briggs approached with his hand already resting on his holster, his stance wide and aggressive. Keller flanked him slightly to the right, mirroring his partner's tension. Neither officer took a moment to assess the scene. A calm woman, and her well-behaved service dog standing quietly on a public sidewalk. "Step back from the dog, ma'am," Briggs shouted, his voice unnecessarily loud for the quiet morning. At almost the same moment, Keller barked, "Control your animal! Keep it restrained!" Mariah's face registered confusion at the contradictory commands. "Officers," she began, her voice steady and dignified despite her surprise, "I'm blind, and this is Justice, my certified service dog. He's completely under control." She kept her free hand slightly raised, making no sudden movements. Years of courtroom experience had taught her how to maintain composure in tense situations. But inside, her heart hammered against her ribs. Doors opened along the street as neighbors emerged to see what was happening. Mrs. Chen stepped cautiously off her porch, garden shears still in hand. The Miller family paused while loading their car for a day trip, their children watching with wide eyes. "Ma'am, I need you to step away from the dog now," Briggs repeated, his voice growing louder. "I can't do that, officer," Mariah explained calmly. "He's my service animal. I need him to navigate. We haven't done anything wrong." Justice sensed the rising tension and shifted position, moving slightly in front of Mariah in a protective stance. The dog remained silent, his posture alert, but not aggressive. His training had prepared him for stressful situations, to stay calm and focus on his handler's safety. "The dog is moving!" "Control your animal!" Keller shouted, his hand now fully resting on his weapon. Mariah felt the slight change in Justice's position through the harness. "He's just doing his job, protecting me. He's not being aggressive." From the sidewalk across the street, Harold Whitaker appeared, walking closer with a smirk stretching across his face. He stopped a safe distance away, arms crossed over his chest. "See?" Harold called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I told you she can't control it. That dog's been causing problems for months." Mariah's head turned toward Harold's voice, her expression hardening with recognition. "That's not true. Justice has never caused any problems." "Sir, please step back," Keller called to Harold without taking his eyes off Mariah and Justice. Then, lower to Briggs. "This matches the call description exactly." The crowd of neighbors grew. Someone murmured, "What are they doing?" Briggs took a step closer, his hand now fully gripping his holster. "Final warning, ma'am. Control your dog or step away from it." "Officer, please," Mariah said, struggling to keep her voice level. "I'm Mariah Ellison. There's been a misunderstanding. Justice is a trained service animal. He's not dangerous." Justice remained in his protective stance, but the tension in the air caused him to let out a soft, low growl. Not lunging, not barking, just a warning sound deep in his throat. "The dog's aggressive," Keller shouted, drawing his weapon and holding it at his side. Mariah heard the distinct sound of a gun being unholstered. Fear flooded her system. "No, he's just responding to your tone. Please, lower your voices and he'll relax." She reached down to place her hand on Justice's back, trying to reassure him. "Easy, Justice. It's okay." Harold's voice cut through again, dripping with manufactured concern. "Officers, there are children here. That dog lunged at kids earlier." "That's a lie," Mrs. Chen called out from her yard. "That dog has never hurt anyone." Briggs's face flushed red. The contradicting voices, the pressure of the growing crowd, and his own adrenaline created a perfect storm of poor judgment. "Ma'am, get that dog under control now!" Justice turned his head toward Briggs, still growling softly, standing his ground in front of Mariah. "He is under control," Mariah insisted, her composure finally breaking. "If you would just—" "Gun!" Keller suddenly shouted, though nothing in Mariah's hands or pockets resembled a weapon. The false alarm sent Briggs over the edge. In one fluid motion, he drew his weapon and aimed. "No!" Mariah screamed, sensing what was happening through the sudden movements and gasps of the watching crowd. The gunshot cracked through the morning air like thunder. Justice made no sound as the bullet struck him. His body jerked violently, then collapsed heavily onto the sidewalk in front of Mariah, blood pooling quickly beneath him. Mariah felt the harness go slack in her hand, felt Justice's weight hit the ground. For one terrible second, she couldn't process what had happened. Then Justice gave a single, soft whimper. "Justice?" Her voice broke as she dropped to her knees, hands desperately searching for her companion. When her fingers met warm, wet fur, a primal sound escaped her throat. "No, no, no! What have you done?" The neighbors erupted in screams and shouts. Mrs. Chen dropped her garden shears with a clatter. A child began to cry. "He was protecting me!" Mariah cradled Justice's head, feeling his labored breathing against her hands. He was just doing his job. Briggs stood frozen, gun still extended, as the reality of what he'd done began to sink in. Keller stepped forward, not to help, but to establish control of the chaotic scene. "Everyone stay back!" Keller shouted at the gathering crowd. Harold Whitaker's smirk had vanished, replaced by a look of shock. Even he hadn't expected this outcome. He began to back away, trying to disappear before anyone connected him to what had just happened. Justice's breathing grew more ragged under Mariah's trembling hands. Blood soaked through her clothing as she bent over him, tears streaming down her face. "Stay with me," she whispered to him, her world collapsing around her. "Please, stay with me." The morning sun continued to shine brightly, indifferent to the tragedy unfolding beneath it. Birds sang in the trees lining the park. A gentle breeze carried the scent of blood across the once peaceful street. And in the sudden silence that followed the gunshot, before the chaos of voices resumed, the only sound was the soft, weakening heartbeat of a loyal companion who had done nothing wrong except exist in a world where some lives were valued less than others. Mariah knelt on the hard sidewalk, her hands pressed against Justice's fur. His chest no longer rose and fell. The warm blood that had pumped through his veins now soaked the concrete beneath them, staining her hands and clothes. Though her body trembled, her face remained composed, a mask of dignity, even as her world collapsed around her. "Justice," she whispered one last time, running her fingers through his soft fur. The connection they'd shared for 7 years, through courthouse hallways, morning walks, and quiet evenings at home, severed in an instant by a bullet. Neighbors rushed forward, their faces twisted with horror and outrage. Mrs. Chen reached Mariah first, kneeling beside her despite the blood. "This is wrong," Mrs. Chen said, her voice breaking. "He did nothing wrong." Tom Rivera, a retired Army veteran from 3 houses down, stepped directly between the officers and Mariah. "What the hell did you just do?" he demanded, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "That was a service animal." Others joined him, forming a protective half-circle around Mariah and Justice. Their voices rose in a chorus of anger and disbelief. "I saw everything. That dog wasn't aggressive. She told you she was blind. Someone call 911. They are 911. What are we supposed to do?" Officer Keller stepped forward, his hand still hovering near his weapon. The crowd's anger seemed to bounce off him, replaced by a cold satisfaction that turned the corners of his mouth upward. "Everyone needs to step back," he ordered, his voice carrying no trace of regret. His eyes locked on Mariah, still kneeling beside Justice. "Should have had that mutt under control." The crowd gasped collectively. Several people pulled out phones, recording Keller's callous words and Briggs's still shocked expression. Something shifted in Mariah at that moment. The initial shock gave way to a familiar clarity, the same clarity she felt on the bench when Justice hung in the balance. She gently laid Justice's head down and stood, her movements deliberate and controlled. Blood dripped from her fingertips and stained the front of her light blue walking outfit. Though she couldn't see the officers, she turned toward them with unerring precision, orienting to the sound of Keller's voice. She stood tall, her back straight, her unseeing eyes somehow finding Keller's face. "Do you know who I am?" Her voice cut through the morning air, clear and commanding. The crowd fell silent, hanging on her every word. "I am Judge Mariah Ellison, Federal Court." The crowd gasped again, this time with recognition. Someone whispered, "The civil rights judge." The blood drained from Briggs's face as the implications hit him like a physical blow. His gun, still in his hand, suddenly felt heavy. He holstered it with trembling fingers. "Federal," he repeated, the word barely audible. Keller's smirk vanished. His eyes darted between Mariah, the crowd with their recording phones, and his partner. "Ma'am, there seems to be a misunderstanding," Keller began, his tone dramatically different, almost deferential now. "We responded to a call about an aggressive dog threatening—" "Save it," Mariah cut him off, her voice sharp enough to make him flinch. "Officer Briggs just shot a clearly marked service animal belonging to a blind person. An animal that was not attacking anyone. I heard no warning. I heard no attempt to de-escalate." She took a step forward, and despite her blindness, both officers instinctively backed up. "Badge numbers. Names. Precinct. Now." Each word fell like a gavel. Briggs found his voice, though it cracked with stress. "Officer Daniel Briggs, badge 4487, East Precinct. Officer Mark Keller, badge 5122, East Precinct," Keller added, less shakily, but with none of his previous arrogance. "Ma'am, you have to understand, the call came in as—" "As what?" Mrs. Chen interrupted. "I live right there." She pointed to her house. "That dog has walked past my home every morning for years. Never once caused trouble." Tom Rivera nodded. "Service dog vest, clear as day. You didn't even try other options." Keller's expression hardened as he scanned the hostile crowd. He leaned closer to Briggs. "Radio for backup. Now." As Briggs fumbled for his radio, Mariah knelt once more beside Justice, her composure finally cracking. She gathered his still warm body into her arms as best she could, his weight heavy against her chest. Blood soaked through her shirt, but she didn't care. "7 years," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Justice has been my eyes for 7 years. He never hurt anyone." From the back of the crowd, Harold Whitaker watched the scene unfold with growing unease. This wasn't what he'd expected. A few stern words from the cops, maybe a fine, something to put that woman in her place. Not this. Not death. And definitely not discovering she was a federal judge. He began to inch backward, slipping between houses, making his quiet exit before anyone remembered his role in what had happened. Briggs spoke into his radio, his voice low and urgent. "Dispatch, this is Officer Briggs. We need a supervisor at 1542 Oakwood Drive. Incident involving a service animal." He swallowed hard. "Possible lawsuit situation." Keller pulled him aside, their backs to the crowd, but Mariah's sensitive hearing caught their hushed exchange. "We stick to the story," Keller whispered fiercely. "Dog was aggressive, moved toward you. You had no choice." "But she's a federal judge," Briggs hissed back. "This isn't some random—" "That's exactly why we need to get our story straight," Keller cut him off. "This is serious lawyer trouble. The union will back us, but only if we don't contradict each other." The crowd continued to grow as more neighbors emerged from their homes, drawn by the commotion. Several approached Mariah, offering gentle words of condolence and support. "I recorded everything," a young woman told her, kneeling beside her. "From the moment they got out of their car. I won't delete it. I promise." "I'm a witness," another neighbor added. "That dog didn't do anything wrong." Mariah nodded, grateful for their support, but lost in her grief. Justice's body grew heavier in her arms as the life energy left him completely. Her world had suddenly become darker than it had ever been, even after losing her sight 15 years ago. A siren wailed in the distance, backup responding to Briggs's call. "I want accountability," Mariah said, her voice carrying across the now silent street. "For justice. For every person who has faced this kind of abuse of power." She turned her face toward the officers. "This ends here. This ends with you." Keller and Briggs exchanged nervous glances as the siren grew louder. Their careers, their futures, everything they'd built flashed before their eyes, all potentially destroyed in the seconds it took to pull a trigger. In Mariah's arms, Justice lay still, his purpose fulfilled until the very end, protecting the person he loved most in the world. Even in death, his body shielded her from the officers who had taken his life. The house felt empty. Mariah stood in her doorway, her hand trembling slightly as she reached for where Justice would normally guide her. The silence was deafening. "One step up," she whispered to herself, muscle memory from years of Justice's gentle guidance. She made her way inside, counting steps and trailing her fingers along familiar walls. Without Justice, her home, once a sanctuary, now felt like an obstacle course. She bumped her hip against the corner of the hallway table, knocking over a picture frame. The glass shattered when it hit the floor. Mariah knelt carefully, feeling for the shards. Her fingers found the frame first, then the photo inside. She didn't need to see it to know what it showed. Her and Justice on the courthouse steps the day he completed his service training. Her fingers traced the edges of the frame, feeling where the glass had broken away. The doorbell rang, startling her. She placed the broken frame on the table and made her way carefully to the door. "Who is it?" she called. "It's Mrs. Chen, Judge Ellison. I brought some food." Mariah opened the door. The smell of homemade chicken soup wafted in. "You shouldn't have to cook tonight," Mrs. Chen said gently. "None of us can believe what happened. It was horrible. Just horrible." "Thank you," Mariah said, accepting the warm container. "Would you like to come in?" "Just for a moment. My husband is waiting in the car." Mrs. Chen helped Mariah set the soup in the refrigerator. "The whole neighborhood is talking about it. Tom Rivera is organizing people to give statements. We all saw what happened." Before Mrs. Chen left, she squeezed Mariah's hand. "We're with you, Judge." What they did wasn't right. Throughout the evening, more neighbors came. Tom Rivera brought bread from his wife. The Jacksons from down the street brought a casserole. Each visitor expressed outrage, offered condolences, promised to stand as witnesses. But when the last neighbor left, the silence returned, heavier than before. Mariah sat on her couch, Justice's collar in her hands. Her fingers traced the worn leather, the metal tags that jingled whenever he moved. She pressed the collar to her chest and finally allowed herself to break down, sobbing until her throat hurt. The television murmured in the background. She'd turned it on for company, unable to bear the quiet. Suddenly, the reporter's words cut through her grief. "Bo's statement from the police union regarding this morning's shooting of a service animal." Mariah raised her head, wiping tears away as she turned up the volume. "The East City Police Union issued the following statement today," the reporter continued. "Officers responded to a 911 call reporting an aggressive dog threatening neighborhood children. Upon arrival, the animal displayed threatening behavior toward the officers, forcing them to take necessary action to protect themselves and bystanders. While we regret the outcome, our officers acted within protocol given the dangerous situation." Mariah's hand tightened around Justice's collar. "Liars," she whispered. "He never threatened anyone." Her phone rang. It was her colleague, Judge Roberts. "Mariah, I just saw the news." "Are you all right?" "No, Raymond, I'm not." Her voice cracked. They shot Justice. And now they're lying about it. I heard their statement. It's disgraceful. Judge Roberts paused. The Chief Justice called me. Words spreading through the judiciary. And? There's concern, Mariah, about a judge being involved in a high-profile incident with police. Mariah sat straighter. Concern? My service dog was murdered by trigger-happy cops who are now lying about it. I should be the one receiving concern, not causing it. I know, I'm on your side. But there are whispers that you should handle this quietly, for the good of the judiciary. Handle this quietly? The words tasted bitter. You mean let them get away with it? That's not what I said. It's what you meant. After hanging up, Mariah sat motionless, Justice's collar still clutched in her hand. The system she'd dedicated her life to was already closing ranks, not around her, but around her dog's killers. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. Judge Ellison? Internal Affairs, ma'am. May we have a word? Two detectives, one man, one woman, sat across from Mariah at her kitchen table. They'd introduced themselves as Detectives Morgan and Perez. We understand this is a difficult time, Detective Morgan began, his voice practiced in false sympathy. But we need to get your statement about what happened this morning. Mariah recounted everything, Harold's known prejudice, Justice's calm behavior, the officer's contradictory orders, the shot without warning. And you're certain the dog didn't lunge at the officers? Detective Perez asked. Justice was a trained service animal. He would never lunge unless I was in danger. But given your condition, Morgan said delicately, is it possible you misinterpreted the sequence of events? Mariah's face hardened. My blindness doesn't affect my hearing or my memory, Detective. I know exactly what happened. Of course, Perez interjected smoothly. But trauma can affect perception. And without being able to see, there are dozens of witnesses, Mariah cut in. Neighbors who saw everything. People with video recordings. The detectives exchanged glances. We've taken statements from several witnesses, Morgan said. Their accounts vary. And Officer Keller's report indicates your dog charged at them, barking aggressively. That's a lie. His report also mentions that you were unable to control the animal when ordered to do so. Mariah's hands formed fists on the table. Justice was under perfect control until your officers created chaos by shouting contradictory orders. Well, Perez said, closing her notebook, we'll continue investigating. The body cam footage should clarify things. I want a copy of that footage, Mariah said immediately. Morgan cleared his throat. Unfortunately, there seems to have been a technical issue. The footage was corrupted during transfer. IT is working to recover it. Mariah didn't believe him for a second. How convenient. After the detectives left, Mariah locked her door and leaned against it, exhaustion washing over her. She'd spent decades in courtrooms, could recognize perjury and obstruction when she heard it. They were building a wall of lies, brick by bureaucratic brick. She made her way to the kitchen for a glass of water when she heard it, the soft purr of a car engine idling outside her house. Moving carefully to the window, she cracked the blinds open, a habit from when she could see. Is someone there? She called to her empty house. Her neighbor Tom's voice came through the window from his porch across the street. Police car, unmarked. Just sitting there, watching your house. Mariah felt a chill run down her spine. They just flashed their lights, Tom called a moment later. Now they're driving off. The message couldn't have been clearer. We're watching you. We know where you live. Mariah moved through her darkened house, double-checking every lock. The day's events played in an endless loop in her mind. Justice's body falling, Keller's sneering voice, the detective's gaslighting, the car watching her home. They thought her blindness made her vulnerable. They thought they could intimidate her into silence. She made her way back to her kitchen table and sat down. Her fingers found Justice's collar again, the metal tags cool against her skin. "You killed my dog," she whispered into the darkness. "But you won't kill my spirit." She reached for the digital recorder she used for legal notes, her fingers finding the familiar buttons with practiced ease. She pressed record. Case notes, August 12th. Subject: civil rights violation and unlawful killing of service animal Justice. Badge number SD 42781. Her voice grew stronger with each word. Perpetrators: Officers Daniel Briggs and Mark Keller, East Precinct. Witnesses: minimum 12 neighbors present at scene. Evidence: multiple civilian videos, contradicting official report. She continued methodically, laying out the facts as she would for a case, identifying potential legal strategies, noting witnesses to contact. This was familiar territory. The careful building of a case, brick by factual brick. First step: secure all video evidence before it disappears. Second: formal complaint with Department of Justice Civil Rights Division, bypassing local channels already showing signs of obstruction. Her fingers moved over Justice's collar as she spoke, drawing strength from the connection to him. "They think, because I can't see, I can't fight," she said into the recorder. "They're about to learn how wrong they are." The morning sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows, but Mariah Ellison found no warmth in it. The house felt emptier than ever, without Justice's nails clicking on the hardwood floors or his soft breathing beside her bed. She reached for her phone and pressed a familiar contact. "Helen? It's Mariah. I need your help." Helen Monroe's voice, steady as always, came through the line. "I heard what happened. It's all over the legal circles. Tell me what you need. I need allies, people I can trust. Can you come over? And could you call David Cho? If anyone knows how to fight this kind of battle, it's him. I'll be there in an hour. And I'll call David right now." Mariah hung up and sat at her kitchen table, running her fingers over the smooth wood surface. For the first time in years, she felt adrift. Without Justice to guide her, even navigating her own home seemed more challenging. But it wasn't just physical guidance she missed. It was his presence, his warmth, his unwavering loyalty. The doorbell rang precisely 1 hour later. "It's Helen," came the voice from outside. "David is with me." Mariah opened the door, and Helen immediately embraced her. Despite being 68, Helen Monroe carried herself with the same authority she'd had on the federal bench for decades. "Judge Ellison," David Cho said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "I'm so sorry about Justice." "Thank you for coming, David." Mariah gestured them inside. "Please, call me Mariah. We're not in court today." They settled in her living room, Helen guiding Mariah to her favorite armchair. "I've already started preliminary research," David said, pulling out papers from his briefcase. "Civil rights violations, violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act, unlawful destruction of property, though I hate calling Justice property." "He was family," Mariah said quietly. "Yes, he was," Helen agreed, "and what they did was criminal." "I need to know what I'm up against," Mariah said. "The police union has already issued their statement painting Justice as aggressive. The internal affairs detectives tried to gaslight me yesterday, suggesting I couldn't understand what happened because I'm blind." David's voice hardened. "Classic playbook. Discredit the victim. Protect the officers." "I requested the body cam footage," Mariah continued. "They claim it was lost in transfer." "Lost?" Helen scoffed. "Convenient." "Too convenient," David agreed. "I'll file motions today demanding all video evidence be preserved. We'll also request all radio communications, the 911 call transcript." "I made some calls this morning," Mariah interrupted. "A clerk I trust at the precinct sent me the incident report. It's full of lies." She handed over her tablet. Helen read it aloud for all of them. Officers responded to 911 call regarding aggressive dog. Owner unable to maintain control. Dog barked and lunged at officers. Officer Briggs discharged weapon in defense of public safety. Helen's voice trailed off in disgust. It's fabricated from start to finish, Mariah said. And notice who they cite as their primary witness? Harold Whitaker. Your neighbor? David asked. The one who made the call? The racist neighbor who's been trying to drive me out of the neighborhood for years, Mariah clarified. The report quotes his 911 call extensively, but conveniently omits his coded language about how people like her don't belong here. David was typing furiously on his laptop. We need to get the actual 911 recording, the unedited version. I have a contact at the dispatch center, Helen offered. I'll make the call. Mariah stood up, pacing carefully along the familiar path between her armchair and the window. There's more. Last night, an unmarked police car sat outside my house. They flashed their lights before driving away. Intimidation, David said, his voice rising with anger. They're trying to scare you into silence. It won't work, Mariah said firmly. Helen's phone rang, and she stepped into the kitchen to take the call. When she returned, her face was grim. My contact says the 911 recording has been placed under restricted access. Only senior officers can access it now. More cover-up, David muttered. Mariah took a deep breath. I think it's time to use my position. I have contacts at the Department of Justice. If a federal judge can't get action on this, who can? She dialed a number she rarely used, direct to the office of the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, Thomas Bennett, an old colleague from law school. Tom, it's Mariah Ellison. Mariah? His voice sounded strained. I was going to call you. I heard what happened. Then you know why I'm calling. I need the DOJ to intervene. These officers killed my service animal, and now the department is covering it up. A heavy silence filled the line. Mariah, I need to be straight with you. There's been talk at the highest levels. The police union has powerful allies, and they're framing this as a judge overreacting situation. Overreacting? Mariah's voice rose. They shot my service dog. I know, but... He lowered his voice. I've been advised to tell you, for the good of the judiciary, to stand down. The words hit Mariah like a physical blow. Stand down? She repeated, her knuckles white around the phone. My dog was murdered, Tom. I understand that, but pursuing this could create complications. The optics of a federal judge in a public battle with law enforcement. The optics? Mariah cut him off. A blind black woman had her service animal executed, and you're worried about optics? Mariah, please. I thought I could count on you, Tom. My hands are tied, he said quietly. I'm sorry. She hung up without saying goodbye. Helen and David watched her, concern etched on their faces. The DOJ isn't going to help, Mariah said flatly. Apparently, I should stand down for the good of the judiciary. Unbelievable, Helen muttered. Not really, David said. The system protects its own. And right now, those officers are being protected by everyone from their sergeant to the DOJ. Mariah nodded slowly. You're right. This isn't just about two bad officers. It's about a system that shields them. Later that day, after court had adjourned and her colleagues had gone home, Mariah sat alone in her chambers. The room was silent, except for the ticking of the antique clock on her bookshelf. She reached into her bag and pulled out Justice's collar, holding it tightly in her fist. The metal tags clinked softly against each other. For 28 years, she had served on the bench, first as a district judge, then elevated to the federal level. She had believed in the system, defended it, been proud to be part of it. Now that same system was telling her to look the other way while her dog's killers walked free. They're all connected, she whispered to the empty room. The police, the union, the internal affairs, even the judiciary, all protecting each other. The weight of betrayal settled over her like a heavy cloak. This wasn't just a fight against Briggs and Keller. It was a fight against an entire system designed to shield them. A system she had been part of, had trusted. Justice's collar felt warm in her hand, the leather worn smooth from years of use. She ran her thumb over his ID tags, remembering the day she'd first fastened this collar around his neck. He had been so young then, eager to serve, to protect. "I won't let them bury this," she said, her voice stronger now. "I won't let them bury you." The next afternoon, Mariah's doorbell rang. She moved carefully through her living room, counting steps in her mind, a habit that kept her oriented even in familiar spaces. The house felt emptier without Justice's nails clicking across the hardwood floors. "Who is it?" she called. "Helen and David," came Helen's steady voice. "And we've brought someone we'd like you to meet." Mariah opened the door. She could hear 3 sets of footsteps, smell Helen's subtle lavender perfume, and detect David's nervous energy in the way he shifted his weight from foot to foot. "Come in," Mariah said, stepping back. "Who's with you?" "Rosa Martinez," a new voice answered, warm and confident. "Community activist. Been raising hell in this city for 15 years now." She took Mariah's extended hand, clasping it firmly with both of hers. "Judge Ellison, what happened to you and Justice is beyond wrong. I'm here to help." Mariah nodded, feeling an immediate connection to Rosa's directness. "Thank you for coming. Please, all of you, let's sit in the dining room. I've got coffee ready." They settled around her table, and Mariah could hear the rustle of papers as David unpacked his briefcase. "I've been working since we last met," David began. "Filed emergency motions to preserve all evidence, but we've hit roadblocks. The department is claiming sovereign immunity on the body cam footage." "Sovereign immunity," Mariah repeated, her voice tinged with bitterness. "They're hiding behind legal shields meant for legitimate government functions, not cover-ups." "Exactly," Helen agreed. "And Judge Rourke was assigned to hear our motion for expedited discovery. He's not being helpful." "Alan Rourke?" Mariah's brow furrowed. "I mentored him, trained him when he first came to the bench." "Well, he's delaying our hearing," David said flatly. "Claims his docket is full for the next 3 weeks." Rosa made a sound of disgust. While evidence conveniently disappears, Mariah tapped her fingers thoughtfully on the table. "They're using procedure to run out the clock. Standard playbook." She paused. "What about witness statements? There were neighbors watching." "That's where I've made progress," David said, his voice brightening. "I've collected statements from 4 witnesses who saw everything. Mrs. Chen from across the street, the Ramirez family, and Jordan Taylor, the college student who lives next door." "What do they say?" Mariah asked. "They all confirm Justice was calm, not aggressive. That the officers were shouting contradictory orders. That Briggs shot without provocation." David's voice hardened. "And they all heard Keller's comment afterward about having the mutt under control." Helen made a disgusted noise. "It's clear-cut police brutality." "Yet they're still denying it," Rosa pointed out. "Witness statements won't be enough. The system protects its own." "You're right," Mariah agreed. "We need more leverage." She turned toward Rosa's voice. "Helen says you organize protests?" "That's right," Rosa replied. "Been doing it since I was 20. Nothing makes power listen like hundreds of voices speaking together." "What are you thinking?" David asked. "The courthouse, the police station, and City Hall," Rosa said promptly. 3 protest sites, rotating daily. Keep the pressure constant. I've already got calls out to disability rights groups, civil rights organizations, and animal welfare advocates. This cuts across all lines. "Can you get media coverage?" Helen asked. "Already have commitments from 2 local stations and a national podcast," Rosa said. Social media is already buzzing. The hashtag Justice for Justice started trending last night. Mariah nodded, impressed. We need the public pressure, but we also need to find the cracks in their legal defense. She stood and moved to a small desk in the corner, returning with a digital recorder. I've been thinking like a judge, analyzing their weaknesses. She pressed play. Her own voice filled the room. Potential vulnerabilities in the police defense. 1. The 911 call. If we can prove Harold Whitaker's call was knowingly false and racially motivated, it undermines everything that followed. 2. Officer training records. If Briggs and Keller lack proper training on service animals, it's an ADA violation. 3. Chain of custody for the body cam footage. Who handled it between recording and the supposed loss? David's chair creaked as he leaned forward. These are exactly the technical traps we need to set, especially the ADA angle. That gives us federal jurisdiction regardless of what Rourke does. I can help with the 911 call, Helen offered. My former clerk works at the dispatch center. She might be willing to risk her job to get us that recording. And I can find out about their training, Rosa added. I know officers who've retired from the department. They'll talk if they think it's for a good cause. Mariah nodded, feeling a surge of hope for the first time since Justice died. We're attacking this from all angles: legal, public pressure, and procedural. There's one more thing, David said, his voice suddenly hesitant. I think we should consider filing a personal lawsuit against Harold Whitaker. He started this with a false 911 call. Make him testify under oath about what he said and why, Helen mused. I like it. So do I, Mariah agreed. Draft the complaint, David. We'll file it tomorrow. I'll get on those protest permits right away, Rosa said, her chair scraping as she stood. First demonstration tomorrow at noon outside the courthouse. I should warn you all, Mariah said, her voice growing serious. They'll try to discredit us. They'll dig into your backgrounds, look for any weakness. Let them try, Rosa said firmly. I've been called every name in the book. It won't stop me. My reputation can handle it, Helen added. And I've been waiting my whole career for a case this important, David finished. I'm all in. Mariah felt a wave of gratitude. Thank you. All of you. As they continued planning, Mariah heard her phone buzz with a news alert. David checked it. Look at this. Your neighbor Mrs. Chen posted a video of the shooting online. It's already got 50,000 views. What does it show? Mariah asked. Everything, David replied, his voice tight with emotion. Justice standing calmly. The officers yelling. The shot. They can't control this narrative anymore, Rosa said, determination in her voice. People are seeing the truth. They worked for hours, strategizing legal moves and public actions. As evening approached, Helen and David gathered their notes. I should go prepare those filings for tomorrow, David said. And I need to make those calls about the permits, Rosa added. As they said their goodbyes at the door, Mariah heard it, faint at first, then growing louder. Voices in the street, chanting in unison. What's happening? She asked. My God, Helen breathed. There are people gathered at the end of your block. Dozens of them. Rosa stepped onto the porch. I didn't organize this. This is spontaneous. The chant became clearer, echoing through the evening air. Justice for justice. Justice for justice. They came on their own, David said, his voice filled with wonder. The community is rallying behind you. Mariah stepped onto her porch, feeling the evening breeze on her face. The chants grew louder as the crowd noticed her. She raised her hand in acknowledgement and the cheers intensified. In that moment, standing on her porch with her new allies beside her, Mariah felt something shift inside her, from grief to resolve, from victim to fighter. The protests had begun without them even planning it. The spark had caught fire on its own. Mariah's heels clicked against the polished marble floors of the courthouse. Her cane tapped steadily as she made her way to Judge Alan Rourke's chambers, a path she knew by heart from her years mentoring him. The familiar scent of old wood and leather files filled her nostrils. "Judge Ellison," his secretary greeted her warmly. "Judge Rourke is expecting you." The door opened, and Alan's footsteps approached. "Mariah, please come in." His voice was smooth as ever, but something felt off, a slight tension in his tone that her sharp ears caught. "Thank you for seeing me, Alan." She settled into the chair he offered, placing her cane beside her. "Of course. I've been following the situation with your service animal. Terrible business." He cleared his throat. "Coffee?" "No, thank you." Mariah sat straight-backed, dignified. "I'll be direct, Alan. You're slow-walking our motions for discovery. The body cam footage is critical evidence, and every day of delay increases the risk it gets lost permanently." Papers shuffled on his desk. "Mariah, you know how backed up our dockets are. I have to maintain proper procedure." "Proper procedure?" She kept her voice level. "You and I both know emergency motions take priority when evidence preservation is at stake. I taught you that during your first month on the bench." A long pause followed. When he spoke again, his voice had that politician's smoothness she'd always warned him against. "The police union has filed counter-motions. There are jurisdictional questions to consider. These things take time." "Time we don't have," Mariah cut in. "Alan, I trained you. I fought for your appointment. You know what's right here." His chair creaked as he leaned back. "Perhaps that's why this is difficult. You taught me to consider all angles, to maintain judicial impartiality. Don't quote my own lessons back to me to justify obstruction." Steel entered her voice. "This isn't about impartiality. This is about justice being buried under paperwork while evidence disappears. I understand you're emotional about your dog. This isn't about emotion." Mariah's fingers gripped her armrest. "This is about police officers shooting a service animal without cause, then covering it up. This is about a system protecting its own at the expense of justice." She leaned forward. "You know me, Alan. Would I pursue this if I wasn't certain? Your certainty isn't the issue." His voice grew colder, more distant. "There are larger considerations." "Yes, there are. Like integrity. Like standing up to corruption. Like everything I taught you about a judge's duty." Silence filled the room. When he spoke again, his tone was dismissive. "I'll review the motions as my schedule permits. That's all I can offer." Mariah stood, her disappointment heavy in her chest. "I expected better from you, Alan." She left his chambers, but paused outside when she heard his phone ring. Something in her gut told her to wait, to listen. "Officer Keller," Alan's voice carried through the door. "Yes, I just spoke with her." Mariah's breath caught. "Don't worry," Alan continued, his voice low but clear to her trained ears. "I'll stall this case into the ground. By the time I'm done, any evidence will be long gone." A pause. "Yes, I understand what's at stake. My nomination to the appeals court won't be affected." The betrayal hit Mariah like a physical blow. Her own student, selling justice for a promotion. "We all have to protect our interests," Alan was saying. "Just keep everything quiet on your end. I'll handle the legal side." Mariah's fingers tightened on her cane as she walked away, her steps measured and controlled despite the rage and hurt burning inside her. The marble halls seemed colder now, tainted by corruption she'd never suspected reached so deep. She made her way to the courthouse steps, the afternoon sun warm on her face. The sound of protesters reached her ears, hundreds of voices chanting her name, demanding justice. "Judge Ellison! Judge Ellison!" The chants grew louder as people noticed her presence. She could hear signs rustling in the wind, feet shuffling on concrete. the energy of the crowd pulsing through the air. "We stand with you," someone shouted, and others took up the cry. The contrast struck her hard. Behind her, the corrupt machinery of a system she'd served faithfully for decades, now revealed to be rotting from within. Before her, the voice of the people, raw and honest in their demand for justice. Her fists clenched at her sides. Alan's betrayal cut deep, not just personally, but at her faith in the institution itself. She had guided him, shaped him, believed in him, and he had chosen power over principle. The crowd's energy washed over her, their support almost physical in its intensity. Their passion both lifted her spirit and highlighted the bitter taste of betrayal in her mouth. These people believed in justice, believed in her fight. Meanwhile, the very system meant to protect that justice was conspiring to bury it. "Justice for justice!" The chant started again, swelling through the crowd. Mariah stood straight on the courthouse steps, a figure of dignity despite the turmoil in her heart. The betrayal of her former student had shaken her, but the voices of the people strengthened her resolve. If the system wouldn't serve justice, she would find another way. The contrast between the corruption inside and the righteousness outside crystallized her purpose. She was no longer just fighting for justice. She was fighting for the very soul of justice itself. The evening news blared from Mariah's television as she prepared her dinner. She kept it on for background noise, a habit from before losing her sight. "Breaking news tonight." The anchor's voice carried that false concern that made Mariah's skin crawl. Questions arise about federal judge Mariah Ellison's fitness to handle a service animal. Sources close to the investigation suggest the judge may have been unable to properly control her dog due to her disability. Mariah's hands stilled over the cutting board. The knife's handle grew slick in her grip. Anonymous reports indicate Judge Ellison has struggled with mental health issues, the anchor continued, potentially clouding her judgment of the incident. The phone rang, making her jump. It was Helen Monroe. "Mariah, are you watching this garbage?" "I'm listening to it right now." Mariah's voice was tight. "They're really going there, aren't they?" "It's disgusting," Helen spat. "Using your blindness against you? And these anonymous sources about mental health? We both know that's coming straight from the police union's playbook." Outside her window, Mariah heard Harold Whitaker's nasally voice carrying across the yard. He was talking loudly to another neighbor. "Threatened me, you know, right there on the sidewalk. That dog of hers was always aggressive, but she wouldn't listen when I tried to warn her. Dangerous situation, having someone like that in the neighborhood." Mariah's free hand clenched into a fist. The lies spread like poison, seeping into the community's consciousness. Her phone buzzed with a text alert. David Cho sending updates from the protest at City Hall. She pressed play on the voice message. "Mariah, they're moving in with riot gear, telling people to disperse, but they've blocked the exit routes. There's families here, elderly people. Wait, they're firing tear gas. They're charging the crowd." The message cut off in chaos. Mariah switched back to the news. Breaking coverage from City Hall, where police are responding to what they call unlawful assembly by protest groups. Multiple arrests are being reported as authorities work to restore order. Her doorbell rang. Then again. And again. Angry voices carried through the door. "Come out, Judge! Face what you started! Justice for our police!" Heavy fists pounded on her door. Mariah stood perfectly still, her heart racing but her mind clear. She reached for her phone. 911, what's your emergency? "This is Federal Judge Mariah Ellison. There's a mob outside my home." The TV anchor's voice cut through. "In related news, we're receiving reports that Judge Ellison resides at 1542 Oak Grove Drive." Mariah's blood ran cold. They'd just broadcast her address live on air. The pounding on her door grew louder. Someone started rattling her windows. "Stay on the line, Judge Ellison," the dispatcher said. "Units are responding." More voices joined the crowd outside. Car doors slammed, engines revved. "Go back where you came from. Can't even control a dog." Through it all, she heard Harold's voice, gleeful and encouraging. "That's right! Show her she can't get away with threatening decent folks." Mariah moved away from the windows, phone pressed to her ear. The house she knew so well by touch and memory now felt like a trap. Each bang on the door made her flinch, but she refused to cower. Police sirens approached. The crowd began to disperse, but not before someone threw something that shattered against her front window. Hours later, after the police had taken statements and cleared the area, Mariah sat in her study. Glass crunched under the repairman's boots as he worked on boarding up her window. The house felt violated, her sanctuary tainted. Her phone hadn't stopped buzzing with updates. More protesters arrested at City Hall. Tear gas had sent 3 elderly demonstrators to the hospital. The police union was calling for an investigation into her mental fitness to serve as a judge. The TV droned on in the background. Sources question whether a blind judge can adequately assess threatening situations. Mariah reached for her recorder, pressing the familiar buttons. Her voice was steady, despite everything. "They think blindness is weakness. They'll learn it's my greatest weapon." She clicked off the recorder, listening to the sounds of her broken home. The repairman's hammer, the whisper of the wind through the broken window, distant sirens, Harold's voice still carrying from his yard, spinning more lies. The system was showing its teeth now, trying to tear her down with every weapon it had. They attacked her blindness, her mental health, her safety. Anything to discredit and silence her. The coordinated nature of it was clear. From the news reports to the leaked address, from Harold's rumors to the police union's smears. They were all connected, all part of the same machine grinding against her. But they had miscalculated. Each attack, each lie, each attempt to break her only strengthened her resolve. They thought her blindness made her vulnerable. They were wrong. It had taught her to listen more carefully, to sense what others missed, to navigate darkness that would leave others helpless. The repairman finished his work, boots heavy on her porch as he left. Mariah sat in her chair, surrounded by the remnants of their intimidation attempt, and began to plan her next move. They had shown their desperation tonight. Now she would show them her strength. Mariah's phone vibrated just before midnight. An unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something made her answer. "Judge Ellison?" The voice was male, young, nervous. "This is Officer Luis Ramirez. Please don't hang up." She sat straighter in her chair. "I'm listening. I was there that day, behind Briggs and Keller. What they did, what we did, it wasn't right." His voice shook. "I have something you need to see. The real footage." Mariah's heart raced, but she kept her voice steady. "How do I know this isn't another trap?" "Because I took an oath to protect and serve. What happened to justice? It goes against everything that badge stands for." He paused. "I'm risking my career. Maybe worse. But I can't sleep at night knowing what really happened." They arranged to meet in 30 minutes at a 24-hour diner across town. Mariah called David Cho immediately. "I need you to come with me," she said, "and bring recording equipment." The diner's bell chimed as they entered. The night waitress barely looked up from her crossword puzzle. David guided Mariah to a corner booth where a young man in civilian clothes sat fidgeting with a coffee cup. "Officer Ramirez?" Mariah asked softly. "Yes, ma'am." His voice trembled slightly. "Thank you for coming." They ordered coffee they wouldn't drink. Ramirez spoke in hushed tones, glancing frequently at the door. "I downloaded the footage before they could delete it," he said, sliding a USB drive across the table. Briggs and Keller didn't know I had access to the cloud backup. David plugged the drive into his laptop. Mariah listened intently as he described what he saw. "Justice is completely calm," David whispered. "He's standing perfectly still next to you. Briggs is shouting, but the dog isn't even barking." He continued narrating. "Keller's deliberately blocking your path. Briggs has his hand on his weapon before Justice even moves. The dog only steps forward when Briggs lunges at you." Mariah's hands clenched under the table. "And after?" David's voice hardened. "They're laughing. Briggs says, 'Blind Betch won't be so high and mighty now.'" Keller's congratulating him on his shot. The coffee cups rattled as Ramirez's hands shook. "There's more," he said. "They called Harold Whitaker later that day. Thanked him for the heads-up about you. Said they'd take care of the problem." "It was planned," Mariah breathed. "They were waiting for an excuse." "The whole department's corrupt," Ramirez said. "But this? Shooting a service dog? Targeting a federal judge? I couldn't stay quiet." "You're very brave," Mariah said softly. "But after this goes public, they'll know it was you." "I know." His voice was resigned but determined. "My uncle lost his seeing eye dog to trigger-happy cops in California. History keeps repeating because good people stay silent." They spent the next hour planning. David copied the footage multiple times. Rosa Martinez joined them, bringing her laptop and social media expertise. "We need to release this strategically," Rosa said, typing rapidly. "I've got contacts at major news outlets, but social media will move faster. Once it's viral, they can't contain it." "We should prepare statements," David added, "from witnesses, other service dog handlers, police accountability experts. Build a wave they can't stop." Mariah nodded. "Officer Ramirez, are you sure about this? There's no going back." "I'm sure, Your Honor." His voice was stronger now. "Some things matter more than a badge." They worked through the night in David's office. Rosa crafted social media posts while David prepared legal documents. Mariah recorded a statement, her voice carrying all the authority of her position. At dawn, Rosa's finger hovered over the post button. The video was queued on multiple platforms, ready to explode across the internet. "This is going to change everything," she said. "It already has," Mariah replied, thinking of Ramirez's courage. Rosa pressed post. Within minutes, the notifications started. 10,000 views, Rosa reported. 20,000 comments flooding in. It's being shared by major activists. David's phone rang. CNN wants a statement. So does MSNBC. 50,000 views, 100,000. It's trending nationwide. Outside, car horns started honking. Chants grew louder as people gathered in the streets. Mariah's phone buzzed constantly with calls from reporters, colleagues, and supporters. "The police union's trying to deny it," Rosa said. "But people are analyzing the footage frame by frame. They can't hide from this. 200,000 views, 500,000. Every major news outlet is picking it up." Through her office window, Mariah heard the crowd swelling. The chants were different now. Not just angry, but triumphant. "We have proof! We have proof!" 1,000,000 views, Rosa whispered. "It's everywhere!" David touched Mariah's shoulder. "You're trending on every platform. People are calling for Briggs and Keller's arrests. The mayor's office is being flooded with calls." The sun rose fully, warming Mariah's face through the window. For the first time since Justice died, she felt her lips curve into a smile. Not of happiness, the grief was still too raw, but of hope. The truth was out. The world could finally see. The protesters' voices carried clearly now. "Justice for justice! Justice for justice!" Mariah stood, straightening her jacket. "What happens next?" "The whole city's mobilizing," Rosa said. Thousands of people are heading downtown. They're calling it the March for Justice. We should be there, David said. Mariah nodded, her smile growing stronger. The truth had been her weapon all along. Now it was finally cutting through their lies. The morning headlines hit like a punch to the gut. Dirty cop arrested. Officer accused of evidence tampering. Mariah's hands trembled as David read the newspaper article aloud in her kitchen. Officer Luis Ramirez, 30, was arrested late last night on multiple charges including tampering with evidence, breach of department protocols, and theft of confidential materials. Sources within the department suggest possible ties to drug trafficking. Drug trafficking! Mariah slammed her hand on the table. He's never touched drugs in his life. They're following the playbook, David said grimly. Discredit the whistleblower. Destroy their reputation. Rosa burst through the door, her heels clicking rapidly across the floor. It's worse. They raided his apartment at 3 a.m., planted evidence. His neighbors recorded it, but the videos keep getting taken down. Mariah's phone buzzed. Helen Monroe, her retired judge friend, was calling. Turn on Channel 7, Helen said without preamble. They're about to announce the ruling on the footage. David grabbed the remote. Judge Alan Rourke's smug face filled the screen as he read from a prepared statement. After careful consideration of chain of custody concerns, this court finds the purported body cam footage inadmissible. Officer Ramirez obtained this material through unauthorized access, violating multiple departmental procedures. Furthermore, the footage shows signs of potential tampering. Lies! Rosa shouted at the TV. We have the raw files. The metadata proves. They don't care about proof, Mariah said quietly. They care about power. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed around Briggs and Keller. Both officers wore pristine uniforms, badges gleaming. Keller's practiced smile oozed false sympathy. We feel for Officer Ramirez, he said smoothly. The pressure of the job sometimes leads good officers down dark paths. We hope he gets the help he needs. Briggs nodded, playing his part perfectly. Our department has zero tolerance for corruption. The system worked exactly as it should. David muted the TV, cursing under his breath. They're going to bury him. Make an example. Mariah's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Texts and calls poured in from supporters, but also anonymous numbers sending threats. Race traitor. Know your place. Back off, or else. Rosa read some of the social media comments. They're calling him a gang member now, saying he was paid off by drug cartels to smear the department. His whole life, Mariah whispered. They're destroying his whole life because he told the truth. The day dragged on. News channels cycled between footage of Ramirez in handcuffs and experts discussing police protocol. Each hour brought fresh character assassination. His high school disciplinary record leaked, Rosa reported. They're focusing on a fight he got into at 16, twisting it into gang violence. His bank records, too, David added. They're claiming suspicious deposits, but it's his grandmother's medical payments. He's been helping with her care. Around sunset, heavy footsteps approached Mariah's front door. Something slid beneath it. A single piece of paper. David retrieved it, his sharp intake of breath telling Mariah everything she needed to know. What does it say? She asked. David's voice was tight with anger. Drop this, or next time it won't be the dog. The room fell silent except for the distant sound of traffic. Mariah's hands found Justice's collar on the side table, fingers tracing the worn leather. The tags still jingled softly, a ghost of happier mornings. They're watching the house, Rosa said, peeking through the curtains. Unmarked car across the street. Let them watch, Mariah replied, but her voice shook slightly. Her phone buzzed again, Ramirez's sister this time. They won't let me see him, she sobbed. They say he's in protective custody, but his lawyer can't reach him either. Mariah gripped Justice's collar tighter, the metal tags pressing into her palm. The memory of that morning flooded back. Justice's warm fur, his steady presence, the sound of his breathing. Then the gunshot, the sudden silence. "You think I'll quit?" she whispered, her voice gaining strength. "You don't know me." The words hung in the air, defiant against the weight of the day's defeats. Justice's collar felt warm in her hands, as if still carrying some echo of his loyal heart. David touched her shoulder gently. "Mariah, maybe we should—" "No," she cut him off. "They killed my dog. They're destroying a good man's life. They think threats will silence me?" Her fingers traced Justice's name on the tag one more time. "They have no idea what they've started." Rosa's phone chimed with another alert. "They're transferring Ramirez tonight. Maximum security, like he's some kind of dangerous criminal." "He knew," Mariah said softly. "He knew this would happen, and he did it anyway. Because it was right." Outside, the unmarked car's engine started. Headlights swept across the living room walls as it pulled away. A reminder that they were always watching, always waiting. The collar's tags jingled one last time as Mariah set it down. The sound seemed to echo through the quiet house, like Justice himself was still there, still standing guard, still believing in justice. The night wrapped around Mariah's house like a heavy blanket. She sat cross-legged in Justice's empty dog bed, her fingers trailing through the soft fabric. The house felt too quiet, too still without the sound of his breathing or the click of his nails on the hardwood floors. Every shadow, every creak made her tense. Without Justice there to alert her to danger, the darkness felt deeper than ever before. His bed still held his scent, that mix of clean fur and the lavender shampoo she used during their weekly baths. "I don't know if I can do this anymore," she whispered to the empty room. Her hand found a stray dog hair caught in the fabric, and her throat tightened. "I'm not as strong as everyone thinks." The doorbell rang, making her jump. "Who is it?" she called out, her voice shakier than she wanted. "Helen Monroe," came the familiar voice. "And I brought that tea you like." Mariah made her way carefully to the door, counting steps she usually took with confidence when Justice guided her. She opened it after checking the security chain. "You look terrible," Helen said bluntly, the scent of peppermint tea following her inside. "When's the last time you slept?" "Sleep feels like giving up," Mariah admitted, following Helen's footsteps to the kitchen. "Every time I close my eyes, I hear that gunshot." Helen's chair scraped against the floor as she sat down. The clink of teacups and the pour of hot liquid filled the silence. "Remember the day you took your oath as a federal judge?" "Of course." Mariah wrapped her hands around the warm cup Helen pressed into them. "Proudest day of my life. You stood there, hand raised, and swore to uphold justice. Not when it was easy. Not when it was safe. You swore to uphold it, period." "That was before I knew how deep the rot went," Mariah said bitterly. "Before I watched them destroy a good man for telling the truth. Before they murdered my dog in broad daylight and got away with it." "Got away with it so far," Helen corrected. "You're not some rookie lawyer they can intimidate. You're federal judge Mariah Ellison. You've spent decades learning how this system works from the inside." The tea's warmth seemed to reach into Mariah's chest, fighting against the cold fear that had settled there. "They have all the power. They have force," Helen countered. "You have something better. You have the law itself. They're so used to bullying their way through. They forget that true power comes from justice, not violence." Another knock at the door interrupted them. Rosa's voice called out, "Judge Ellison? It's Rosa Martinez." Helen let her in, and Rosa's quick footsteps approached the table. "The community's asking about you. They're worried." "They should be worried about Ramirez," Mariah said. "He's the one in danger." "You don't understand," Rosa said, pulling out a chair. You're their hope. Every time you walk into that courthouse with your head high, it shows them that standing up to bullies is possible. Even without justice? Mariah's voice cracked on his name. Especially without justice, Rosa insisted. They thought killing him would break you. Show them how wrong they were. Helen's hand covered Mariah's. Remember that case last year? The one about the immigrant children being denied schooling? The district tried every trick to stop those kids from enrolling, Mariah remembered. And you found 7 different legal precedents they'd overlooked. You built your case so carefully they couldn't wiggle out of it. That was different, Mariah protested. That was in my courtroom, where rules matter. Rules always matter, Helen said firmly. They're just counting on you forgetting that. They want you emotional, reactive. They expect you to fight hard, but you need to fight smart. Rosa's chair creaked as she leaned forward. The protests are still growing. People are angry about Ramirez. We can channel that energy, but they need to see you leading the charge. Not with force, Helen added quickly. With authority. With dignity. With the full weight of federal law behind you. Mariah's fingers found Justice's collar again, but this time, instead of grief, she felt something else stirring. Purpose, determination. The same fire that had driven her to become a judge in the first place. They think, because I'm blind, I can't see them clearly, she said slowly. But I've spent my whole life learning to see what others miss. Every detail, every contradiction, every loose thread they left hanging. Now you're thinking like a judge again, Helen said approvingly. The community's ready, Rosa added. They just need direction, strategy. Mariah straightened in her chair, her hands steady now as she set down her teacup. The weight of fear and doubt began to lift, replaced by something stronger, the steel core of justice that had carried her through decades on the bench. They're used to people fighting with anger, she said. They know how to handle protests and outrage, but they don't know how to handle someone who knows their playbook inside and out. And who has friends in high places, Helen reminded her. And a whole community behind her, Rosa added. The empty dog bed in the corner still ached like an open wound, but Mariah felt Justice's spirit with her, urging her forward. Not with barks and growls, but with the same steady loyalty he'd always shown. Smart, not hard, she repeated, tasting the words. They won't expect that. They're so used to throwing their weight around. They've forgotten what real justice feels like. The morning light filtered through the study's windows as Mariah ran her fingers over the Braille law books spread across her desk. The familiar dots beneath her fingertips felt like old friends, guiding her through decades of legal precedent. Helen sat nearby, papers rustling as she searched through case files, while David Cho paced the room, his footsteps quick and determined. Here's what they don't expect, Mariah said, pulling a specific volume closer. They think we'll file a standard wrongful death suit, something they can bury in local courts where Judge Rourke and his friends can kill it. They've got their usual playbook ready, David agreed, his pacing stopping. Delay tactics, jurisdictional challenges, evidence suppression. I've seen it 100 times. Mariah's fingers moved faster over the Braille text, finding the section she needed. But there's something they've overlooked. Section 242 of Title 18. Helen's chair creaked as she leaned forward. The federal civil rights statute? That's rarely used. Exactly, Mariah said, a hint of satisfaction in her voice. It bypasses local jurisdiction entirely. When law enforcement deliberately violates constitutional rights under color of law, especially against protected classes, which I am, both as a disabled person and as a black woman, it becomes a federal matter. David's footsteps quickened with excitement. They can't hide behind qualified immunity either. Service animals are protected under the ADA. Justice wasn't just a pet. He was medical equipment, legally speaking. More than that, Helen added, papers shuffling. The body cam footage might be inadmissible in local court, but federal rules of evidence are different. We can subpoena the original files directly from the manufacturer. Mariah nodded, her hands moving to her laptop, fingers flying over the keyboard as she began drafting. We need to build this like a pyramid. Every block supporting the ones above it, no gaps they can exploit. The room filled with the sound of typing and rustling papers as they worked. David called contacts at the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department. Helen reached out to her network of retired judges, each call adding another layer of support to their case. Judge Martinez in the Ninth Circuit owes me a favor, Helen said after one call. She's willing to file an amicus brief about the systematic abuse of qualified immunity in service animal cases. Good, Mariah said, still typing. And Professor Chen from Yale Law agreed to provide expert testimony about the Americans with Disabilities Act. We're not just building a case, we're building a framework for future cases. David's phone buzzed. Rosa says the protest crowds are growing. Church groups are joining in now. Veterans too, after hearing how they treated a service animal. The public pressure helps, Mariah acknowledged. But this time we're not counting on it. This case will stand on legal merit alone. Hours passed as they worked. The afternoon sun shifted across the room. Mariah's housekeeper brought them sandwiches they barely touched, too focused on their task. Look at this pattern, Helen said, spreading out reports. 3 other cases in the past year where police shot service dogs, all buried in local courts, all with the same tactics. Add them to the filing, Mariah directed. Show it's not isolated, show it's systematic. Her fingers moved across her braille display, checking each paragraph for precision. Every word matters. Every citation needs to be perfect. David stopped his pacing to lean over the desk. They'll try to paint you as emotional, as pursuing a personal vendetta. Let them try, Mariah said calmly. The filing speaks for itself. Pure law, pure fact, pure precedent. No emotion needed, though God knows they deserve our anger. The sound of chanting drifted through the windows, growing louder as evening fell. Justice for justice. Justice for justice. Helen touched Mariah's shoulder. They're gathering again. Must be hundreds out there. Thousands, David corrected, looking out the window. And news vans, too. Mariah saved her work with a few keystrokes. The media attention is useful, but it's not our focus. By the time this filing hits the federal docket tomorrow morning, it won't matter what they say on the news. The legal wheels will already be turning. She stood, stretching muscles stiff from hours of work. David guided her to the window, where the chants grew louder. The evening air carried the sound of determination, of a community united in purpose. Justice for justice! Justice for justice! Describe it to me, Mariah requested quietly. They filled the whole street, David said. Candlelight vigil, signs with Justice's picture. There's a group of veterans in uniform at the front, church groups with their banners, families with children. Even some police officers, retired ones, I think, standing with them. Helen joined them at the window. They've got no idea what's coming. They think this is just another protest they can wait out. Let them think that, Mariah said, her voice firm. While they're watching the crowds, our filing will hit like a thunderbolt. By the time they realize what's happening, it'll be too late to stop it. The chants continued, rising and falling like waves against the shore. Mariah stood straight and tall, feeling the energy of the crowd below. For the first time since Justice's death, the darkness didn't feel quite so heavy. The path ahead was clear, marked out in legal precedent and federal statute. Justice for justice. Justice for justice. Tomorrow, Mariah said softly, touching the window glass. Tomorrow we show them what real justice looks like. Rosa Martinez burst into Mariah's study without knocking, her footsteps quick and excited. "Judge Ellison, you need to hear this right now." Mariah turned from her desk, hearing the urgency in Rosa's voice. "What is it?" "One of our volunteers works as a janitor at Donovan's Bar and Grill," Rosa explained, pulling out her phone. "You know, that fancy place where all the lawyers hang out after court? She recorded something last night." David and Helen gathered closer as Rosa pressed play. Judge Alan Rourke's smooth voice filled the room, slightly slurred from expensive whiskey. "Don't worry about Mariah's little crusade, Mark. I've got it handled." Rourke's familiar laugh carried through the recording. "She thinks she's so clever with this federal filing, but I've already called in favors. We'll bury it in procedural motions until everyone forgets." Officer Keller's distinctive sneer followed. "Better work fast. These protesters aren't going away. Please. I mentored her, remember? I know exactly how she thinks. By the time she realizes what's happening, the statute of limitations will have run out. Your pension is safe." Mariah's hands gripped her desk, knuckles white. The betrayal cut deeper, hearing it so raw and unfiltered. "The recording goes on for 10 minutes, Rosa said. They get even more specific about how they're planning to obstruct justice. And there's no question, it's them. You can see them clearly in the security footage from the bar." Helen's chair scraped back. "This changes everything. Conspiracy to obstruct justice, caught on tape. The Bar Association will have to act." "Not just the bar," David added, already dialing his phone. "This is exactly what we needed to force federal oversight. I'm calling the Civil Rights Division right now." Rosa was already posting the recording online, her fingers flying over her phone. "Going live in 3, 2, 1. The response was immediate. Within minutes, their phones started buzzing with notifications, news alerts, text messages, calls from reporters. "CNN is running it," Helen reported, checking her tablet. "MSNBC, too. They're playing the audio on repeat." Mariah sat very still, processing. "Alan taught at the Judicial College with me, spoke at conferences about ethics, all while being this corrupt." The sound of sirens grew outside. Police cars and news vans were arriving, their flashing lights visible even to Mariah's limited perception. David hung up his phone. "DOJ is sending a team. They want all our evidence, especially the stuff about the other service dog shootings. This recording proves the pattern of cover-ups we suspected." Rosa's phone kept buzzing. "Social media is exploding. Adjutor Judge the Judge is trending. People are sharing clips of Rourke's speeches about judicial integrity, side by side with the recording." More footsteps in the hallway. Mariah's security detail arriving. "Judge Ellison," the lead officer said, "we need to move you. The press is swarming the building." "No," Mariah said firmly. "I'm not hiding. Not now." The next hours passed in a blur of activity. The recording played on every news channel. Legal experts dissected every word. Reporters dug into Rourke's past cases, finding suspicious patterns. By midnight, the Judicial Council announced an emergency session. By dawn, they had suspended Rourke pending investigation. "He's trying to claim the recording was doctored," Helen reported, reading updates. "But 3 different audio experts have verified it's genuine." David returned from a series of calls, excitement in his voice. "The DOJ just announced they're taking over the investigation. Full federal oversight. They're sending U.S. Marshals to secure all the evidence." Rosa showed them her phone. "Look at the courthouse. People have been gathering all night." The crowd's chants carried through the windows, louder than ever. "Judge Ellison! Judge Ellison!" Mariah stood, straightening her jacket. "What time is it?" "Almost 9, Helen said. "Your hearing is in 30 minutes. Then it's time." Mariah picked up her cane. "David, do you have the amended filing ready?" "Right here." Added the recording and 50 pages of supporting evidence. The The security team escorted them downstairs. The moment they opened the front door, the sound hit them like a wave. Hundreds of voices cheering, cameras clicking, reporters shouting questions. Rosa took Mariah's arm. "Ready?" More than ready. Mariah stepped forward, head high. The crowd parted, forming a path. Voices called out support. "We're with you, Judge. Make them pay. Justice for justice." Reporters thrust microphones forward. "Judge Ellison, what's your response to Judge Rourke's recording? Will you be pressing additional charges? How does it feel to be vindicated?" Mariah kept walking, Rosa guiding her through the chaos. Her cane tapped steadily on the pavement, each step purposeful and sure. The courthouse steps loomed ahead. The same steps where, months ago, she had climbed with justice by her side. Now she climbed them alone, but not unsupported. The crowd's energy lifted her, their voices a wall of strength at her back. At the top of the steps, Mariah paused. The morning sun warmed her face. Below, the crowd fell silent, waiting. David leaned close. Keller and his lawyer just arrived. They looked terrified. "Good," Mariah said quietly. "They should be." The massive courthouse doors opened before her. Inside, justice waited. Not the twisted version that had protected corruption for so long, but real justice, the kind she had spent her life serving. The crowd's chant followed her in. "Judge Ellison! Judge Ellison!" Each step echoed in the marble hallway, carrying her toward the courtroom where everything would change. The federal courtroom hummed with tension. Every seat was filled, with overflow crowds watching on monitors in adjacent rooms. Briggs and Keller sat rigid at the defense table, their faces pale and sweating under the harsh fluorescent lights. Harold Whitaker shuffled to the witness stand, his previous smugness replaced by nervous twitches. The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman from the DOJ's Civil Rights Division, approached with a tablet in hand. "Mr. Whitaker, we're going to play your 911 call from that morning. Please, listen carefully." Harold's voice filled the courtroom, dripping with barely concealed hatred. "There's this black woman who can't control her dog. These people don't belong here. Children aren't safe. Someone needs to do something." The prosecutor paused the recording. "Mr. Whitaker, you testified earlier that Justice, Judge Ellison's service dog, was lunging at children. Were there any children present that morning?" Harold shifted uncomfortably. "Well, there could have been. Yes or no, Mr. Whitaker?" "No," he muttered. "In fact, security footage from your own house shows the sidewalk was empty except for Judge Ellison and Justice, doesn't it?" Harold's face reddened. "You don't understand." These people? The prosecutor's voice sharpened. "Please explain to the jury exactly who you mean by these people." The courtroom tensed. Harold glanced at his lawyer, who stared at the table, knowing any intervention would only make it worse. I just meant, Your Honor, permission to treat the witness as hostile?" "Granted." What followed was a methodical destruction of Harold's credibility. The prosecutor produced years of his social media posts, neighborhood complaints, and recorded conversations revealing a pattern of racist behavior. Officer Ramirez took the stand next, his back straight, voice clear. The bogus charges against him had been dropped that morning. "Officer Ramirez, please describe what you saw on Officer Briggs's unedited body cam footage." Justice was calm, following all commands. He moved in front of Judge Ellison protectively, but never aggressively. Officer Briggs shot without provocation. And after the shooting? Officer Keller laughed. He said, and I quote, "One less problem in the neighborhood." Keller's attorney objected, but the damage was done. The jury's faces showed their disgust. The evidence mounted hour after hour. Internal affairs documents revealed systematic cover-ups. Text messages showed Keller coordinating with Judge Rourke to obstruct justice. Financial records exposed the police union's slush fund for settling misconduct cases. When the verdict came 3 days later, it was unanimous. Briggs and Keller, guilty on all counts. Civil rights violations, conspiracy, obstruction of justice. The judge's voice rang out. "Officer Briggs, Officer Keller, please rise." They stood, shoulders slumped. "This court sentences each of you to 15 years in federal prison. Your pensions are revoked. You will never work in law enforcement again." The gallery erupted in cheers. The judge continued through the noise. Furthermore, this court finds that the police union acted as a criminal enterprise under RICO statutes. All assets are frozen pending further investigation. Harold Whitaker wasn't in court to hear his fate. He'd fled town the night before, but it didn't matter. Civil rights organizations had already filed a dozen lawsuits. His face was plastered across national media as the epitome of racist vigilantism. Outside the courthouse, the crowd swelled into thousands. Signs waved, "Justice prevails," and "Thank you, Judge Ellison." Mariah emerged with her legal team. The sun warmed her face as tears streaked down her cheeks. Rosa squeezed her arm. "They're all here for you," Rosa whispered. "Every person you inspired to stand up against corruption." The chants grew louder. "Justice! Justice! Justice!" Each chant hit Mariah's heart like a wave. She thought of her faithful companion, gone but not forgotten. The system had tried to break her, to silence her, to make her doubt herself. Instead, she had broken the system's grip on power. David touched her shoulder. "The DOJ is announcing a national review of service animal shootings. They're calling it the Justice Initiative." Helen added, "The state bar just disbarred Rourke. Every case he touched is being reviewed." The crowd's energy surrounded Mariah like a warm embrace. For the first time since that terrible morning, she felt something beyond grief, beyond anger, beyond determination. She felt justice. Real justice. The kind that changes systems, not just punishes individuals. The kind that honors a faithful companion's sacrifice. Weeks passed like gentle waves washing away the sharpest edges of grief. Mariah stood in the training center's sunlit courtyard, her heart beating faster as soft paws padded across concrete. The trainer, Sarah, guided a young German shepherd toward her. "Judge Ellison, meet Honor. He's 2 years old and completed his advanced service training last week." Mariah knelt, extending her hand. Honor's wet nose touched her palm, followed by a gentle lick. His fur felt silky beneath her fingers as she traced the shape of his head, his ears, his strong shoulders. "He's beautiful," Sarah said softly. "Black and tan, just like Justice was. But he has his own personality, gentle, intuitive, and incredibly focused." Tears welled in Mariah's eyes as Honor pressed closer, as if sensing her emotion. The dog's warmth against her leg felt both familiar and new, like coming home to a house that had been carefully rebuilt. "Honor," Mariah whispered, testing the name on her tongue. The dog's tail wagged, thumping against her side. Sarah guided them through their first training session together. Honor responded to commands with precise attention, moving in perfect sync with Mariah's movements. When they practiced street crossing, his body positioned exactly where Justice used to be, Mariah felt a piece of her heart click back into place. That same afternoon, her phone buzzed with news that made her grip Honor's harness tighter. Congress had passed the Justice Act. The legislation, named after her fallen companion, created strict federal oversight of any cases involving service animals. It also established new protections for disabled individuals facing discrimination or police misconduct. The vote was overwhelming, David told her over the phone. Your story changed minds. Even politicians who usually block reform couldn't ignore this. The next morning, Mariah prepared to return to court for the first time since the trial. Honor's harness jingled as she attached it, the sound both different and right. She straightened her judge's robe, feeling its familiar weight settle on her shoulders. Outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered. Not protesters this time, but supporters. Their cheers rolled up the steps like thunder as Mariah emerged from her car. Honor stood steady beside her, alert but calm. "Judge Ellison! Judge Ellison!" She recognized Rosa's voice in the crowd, then Helen's, then others, neighbors, activists, fellow judges who had stood with her. Their support wrapped around her like a shield. The first step felt momentous. Honor moved with perfect precision, matching her pace. Another step, then another. The marble stairs that had once felt like a mountain now rose before her like a path to victory. Reporters called questions. "Judge Ellison, how does it feel to return? What message do you have for other victims of police misconduct? Will the Justice Act prevent future tragedies?" She kept walking, Honor's harness firm in her grip. The dog navigated her past the press with gentle guidance, just as justice had done countless times before. Halfway up, a young girl's voice cut through the noise. "Thank you for not giving up." Mariah turned slightly, smiling in that direction. More voices joined in. "Welcome back, Your Honor. Justice lives on. You showed them they can't break us." The courthouse doors waited above, their familiar presence drawing her forward. Honor's steps remained steady, his training impeccable. Yet there was something more, a connection growing with each shared moment, each synchronized movement. At the top of the steps, Mariah paused. The morning sun warmed her face as the crowd's energy swelled around her. Honor stood perfectly still, waiting for her signal. She reached down, running her fingers through his fur, feeling the strength and loyalty in his presence. "Justice lives on in you," she whispered. Her words meant only for Honor's ears. The dog pressed closer, as if making a promise of his own. Together they faced the courthouse doors, not as replacement for what was lost, but as something new born from the ashes of injustice. Honor's harness was steady in her hand as they took the final steps forward. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please share it with your friends and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.